or you could text at 202-748-8003. Again, we're talking with Michael McShane, the Director of National Research for EdChoice. So I've pulled up all the slides. There's so much data here, but I want to start with one, and then we'll kind of swing through them. There's one, it's on page 4. It says teachers are less optimistic than parents about K through 12 education. Half of teachers believe K through 12 education is going well in their local school district. Just 1 in 4 believe it's going well nationwide, consistent with the fall. Tell us a bit more about what stood out about that question and the responses.
Yeah, so this is a kind of classic polling question that we ask Americans, the general population, we ask American parents, and we ask American teachers the kind of right track, wrong track. Do you think the American education system is going the right direction or the wrong direction? And there's a couple things that we've usually found, and that is, one, the closer you get to the schoolhouse or the classroom, the more positively people view education. So they are least optimistic or least positive about the national level. They are more optimistic when we ask at the state level, and they're most optimistic at the local level. The other thing that we tended to find was that the general population is more pessimistic than parents are. Parents whose children are actually in schools tended to view schools much more positively than the general population. Interestingly, teachers kind of sit between parents and the general population. They're a little bit more pessimistic than parents are, but they're a little bit more optimistic than the general population is. But we still see that same pattern. They tend to think most positively about what's going on at the local level, a little bit less positively at the state level, and less positively at the national level.
Speaking of the national level, in one of the next slides was teachers generally trust other teachers to make good decisions about education, but have less trust in their state legislature and the U.S. Department of Education. I spend most of my days based at the White House, and I've actually interviewed Education Secretary Linda McMahon several times about her efforts to do away with the Education Department. That's something President Trump campaigned a lot on. Dive a bit more into what stood out to you about those results and how kind of the local versus state versus national level factors into all of this.
Yeah, I think it's a variation on the theme of the earlier question, that people tend to have a much better understanding of what's happening locally. And if you think even of a teacher, of what's going on in their individual classroom. And we recognize that as you abstract away from the classroom and the school, you just have a less good idea of what's going on there. Even go to, I should say, I was a teacher myself, and I'm married to a teacher from a family of teachers, so hopefully I'm not saying anything that's going to offend any of them, or I'm going to get an earful about it. But, you imagine when you're in your classroom, you have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. You know what students are doing well, you know what students are doing poorly. It can be pretty, who is absent and who's present. You see all of those things. Even one step of abstraction away from that, like the principal. The principal might have a reasonably good idea of what's going on, but it's not as granular as a teacher does. Now, there's sort of a corollary here that parents have a similar thing, that they actually have a child in the school, but sometimes they are viewing it through the lens of what's happening with their own child. But we keep abstracting out. We think of even the school district. So a superintendent or a school board member doesn't have that same level of granularity that a principal does. And go down another level that a teacher does, right? And then you say the State Department of Education, and then the Federal Department of Education. And so by the time you get to, I don't know if the building is still on Maryland there in Washington, D.C., or I think they're planning on moving it somewhere.
Yeah, but right now it's
by the time you get to 400 Maryland or whatever its address was, you just don't really have a good look of what's happening in individual schools every day. And I think teachers have a very clear, intuitive sense of that, and thus, when they hear pronouncements coming from the federal government, they know that there are multiple layers between the classroom and whoever are making those pronouncements, and I think they have a certain measure of skepticism towards them.
I can relate to you. I come from a family of a lot of teachers. My own mother, my mother-in-law are career teachers, both nearing the 40-year mark in teaching and still going, a couple cousins.
Oh, God bless them. That's fantastic.
I know they're interested in this segment. We do have some...
We'll mind our P's and Q's.
Yeah, right? Sure we will. We don't want to get detention. I want to bring in some callers because some folks have called in, have some questions or comments for you. We'll start with Jerona. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, calling in from Elmwood Park, Illinois, on the Educator line. Good morning, Jerona. You're on with our guest.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm calling in because I've been an educator for 26 years. And what I want to say is you guys hit the nail on the head when you talked about how teachers kind of just know more about what their students are doing and what's really going on in the system than legislators or even their principals at times. And I think something that is so stressful for a lot of teachers, especially myself, those of us working in inner city in particular, is the idea that somehow the reason those schools are not doing well is because they have less resources, or there's root causes that we're not getting to. And as a Black educator who's working with Black students right now, it's just not true. They have every resource everybody else has. They have the books, they have the technology, but what they don't have a lot of times is parents who love them and family support. And we don't talk about that enough. We talk about school choice. Well, I work in a place where all of the parents have their kids there as a choice. It's a private school that is a part of a program that funds, families to come to the school. So they have a choice. But when you look at the students, they're not making the best choice. I'm going to be honest. I mean, the amount of off-task behavior and time spent on classroom management is not discussed. And that is really what's holding students back from being the best students they can be. A lot of times you don't have parents who are involved, or they're involved in the wrong way. I've worked in this system many years. I've worked in many communities. I've been in upper class communities, and I've been in, communities that are not so well. And the biggest difference between the two is that in the upper class community, parents are supportive. They're not always, they sometimes get a little bit too involved, but they're very involved. In other communities, they're not involved at all, or they're involved in a way that harms their kids, which is to come into school, fight with the teachers, fight with the principals, argue they want their kids to have this and not this, or the kids are just not there. I've been amazed this year at the absences of elementary school students, 30, 40 plus absences. I asked the principal, where are the parents, what's going on, and all they do is say, hey, we can't force them to come to the school. These are the issues that we really need to tackle, and they don't cost a penny. We don't need more money in the schools. We need families involved, and we need the schools to be allowed to do what they need to do. When I started 26 years ago, teacher told the kids what to do, they did it. Today, you tell the kids what to do, they tell you no, and that's it. And that's the difference.
There's a lot there, Jerona. Thank you for weighing in. Michael, I'm curious if any of her points stood out to you that you want to respond to or build upon.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you so much. 26 years of commitment to children. Much appreciated. That's a fantastic career, and I can only imagine the number of lives that you've touched doing that. It's a wonderful, incredible thing. There's two things that I do want to touch on that relate to the polling that we've done. The first is this idea around school spending. I'm so glad that she brought that up, because I think this is one of those areas where people actually just do not have a good understanding of how much American public schools spend per child per year. We actually asked a question in this poll of teachers, just asking them to estimate how much their local schools spend per child per year. But it's similar to a question that we asked parents. It's something that we asked the general public. And I'll tell you, almost universally, all three of those groups, even though they have different levels of connection to schools, almost always give us the same answer. And it's they think that schools spend $5,000 per student per year. That's usually our median answer, $5,000 per student per year. It is important to note, the National Center for Education Statistics, the federal educational statistical arm, just put out a study in the last couple of weeks that puts current spending, so this is not counting capital expenses, debt expenditures, any of that sort of stuff, at more than $17,600 per student per year. When you go all in of the total revenues that are devoted to K-12 education, I believe it's more than $21,000 per student per year. So there is this area where if you ask, and we've done with this polling result shows up over and over again to us, people just don't really have a good understanding of how much schools are spending. And I think oftentimes they're quite surprised when they realize it's more than 3 times what they expected before. The second piece that I want to bring up that I think is super important, and we can maybe get into some of the surveying that we did about teacher attitudes and teacher frustrations, is this idea of chronic absenteeism. Again, something that I think people don't necessarily have, that aren't spending a lot of time in schools or poring over these statistics, need to understand is just the number of students that are not in school every day. Chronic absenteeism is usually defined as, I think, missing about 10% of the school year. Most states, it's 180 days. We're talking about missing 18 days of school, or, So we're missing a lot of days. Historically, pre-pandemic, we saw around 15% chronic absenteeism across the country, which is not great, but it peaked at almost double that during the pandemic. I think in the 2022 school year, it was almost 29%. So nearly between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 students missed more than 10% of the school year. Now, it has come back down. I think the most recent data on this is collected by Matt Malkus at AEI. I think we're looking in the 24-25 school year, just under 23% of students were chronically absent. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a teacher, where almost a quarter of their students might not be there regularly, and you think about, again, I sort of do this as a lens of a teacher myself. The student is missing, so you're putting together work for them that they missed. When they come back into the classroom, they're behind. If they're missing multiple days, they're particularly behind. So then let's say they show up to class on Wednesday or Thursday, and they haven't been there Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. They're lost in what's going on. You as a teacher are trying to move the class forward, but you have students who are coming in and out at various times. Discipline problems come from this. Just general frustration comes from this. So I think one of the sort of underestimated effects that are driving some of the numbers that we're seeing around teacher frustration is chronic absenteeism. It's students that aren't there because it can be so disruptive to have students that are missing school and trying to get them back up to speed while still trying to move the class that was there on. It's happening at irregular intervals. Super duper frustrating, and I think a real reason why teachers are feeling frustration and burnout.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Before we go to our next caller, I want to tick through just 3 slides to give people a better idea of some of the data that you've compiled. One of them is over 2/3 of teachers feel a sense of purpose and hopeful when thinking about the future. Far fewer feel in control, with 1/4 feeling overwhelmed. Another is teachers express high levels of pessimism about the teaching profession this spring, with detractors increasing by 11 points compared to this time last year. And then teachers' likelihood to recommend their profession remains low overall, but has slightly increased since April 2024. So a lot of factors being considered. Let's bring in another caller, John from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, on the all others line. So not an educator, not a student. But John, you're on with our guest.
Thank you for taking my call. First of all, although I am not an educator, I have a daughter who's an educator.
Great.
I retired in 2018. I drove a school bus until last year, elementary school, K through 5. One of the problems we have is any kid who I had a problem with on that bus, common denominator, no father, no parent. The other problem was the school. I'll give you an example. If I had a kid that would say first grader, second grader, F you, all these horrible things, hitting other kids, the only way that school would do anything, if I wrote that kid up and I said, this kid's continued behavior is impacting my ability to safely and efficiently operate this bus. The other thing I find, and people are going to hate me for saying this, there are not enough male teachers in the elementary school. I can tell you now, as a bus driver, as a male, I had fewer problems than female bus drivers, or fewer problems than people that were not raising their kids properly. We can't keep blaming educators. We can't keep requesting money. Eventually, we're going to have to get to the point where we're going to have to say, you know what, parent, you're the problem. I have 8 grandchildren, 6 and under. My one daughter was a school teacher before she became a full-time parent. I'll tell you now, none of my grandkids will step in a public school. The other thing I did, lastly, when I drove that bus, my good older kids were in the back. My good middle kids were in the middle. My knuckleheads were up front. If I had a kid that was always on the cell phone, sitting next to a good kid, I let that parent know. And if that parent wanted, I moved that kid. Kids in second grade with better cell phones than me. It starts with the parent, and we got to stop all this analysis of causal factors with absenteeism and all that. It starts at the root cause with the parent. You can't keep addressing causal factors. That does not get you where you need to get to. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, John. Michael, you want to respond? Interesting to get a bus driver's perspective, because that's a really relevant environment too.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Seeing students in that particular time of day, sort of before and after school, when they're getting ready for school, when they're coming home, I think gives a really interesting insight to what's going on. One of the poll questions that we asked this during this survey, which sort of touches on, I think, a bit of the statistics that you highlighted before we took the call, was the frequency of disruptions in class. And unfortunately, we're seeing around a third of teachers saying they are having, it was the top two discipline categories, so it's either very or extremely frequent discipline issues in their classroom. About a third of teachers are representing that. And if you add in those that say that it's somewhat
Hey, good morning.
you're adding, I think, another 20
drunk
or 30
man.
points on there. So we're seeing lots of teachers reporting that they're having disruptions in their classroom. Interestingly, we also asked how often is technology causing you problems, and it was about the same at the same rate. So I think we're definitely seeing lots of examples of disruption in classrooms, and again, it has knock-on effects on the student learning of other children in the classroom, but also just a lot of frustration from the teachers.
Let's go to George calling in from Saugus, Massachusetts on the student line. Good morning, George. You're on with our guest.
Mm-hmm. Yes, hi, good morning. I have a question that the teacher from Illinois would say that it doesn't matter what area you're in. For instance, if you go to school in Lynn and you go to school in Linfield, there's a difference in the school. There's a difference in the equipments and stuff in school, so I don't see how that doesn't matter. And also, you got to understand that we come from a society where it's been segregated and doesn't want everyone to succeed. And I would like for you to speak on that. Thank you for your
We don't want to speak on that.
Thank you, George. Michael, I'll actually add on to his call because we got a question on X from somebody named Jay Sanders that builds on this, saying, do you compare how people feel about their schools with the educational outcome of those schools? So if you could combine both of those questions and provide an answer, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. I don't think we've actually done a crosswalk like that, where we've looked at the performance of schools. There's some sort of technical challenges there of we do sort of a random sample. So in this case, we did a random sample of, I think it was 1,031 teachers all across the country. So being able to crosswalk them to an individual school. Now, we do it to the state to get some of these spending questions where we ask how much their state is spending and whether they think that is too high or too low, and we can give them the information as a kind of experiment to see whether that changes or not. And so, look, I mean, I think just like the broader point that I think the caller brought up, and I think that frankly the previous callers have all brought up, and is worth sort of naming and speaking about, is that schools are an institution, or institutions that sit within our broader society. And many of the issues, both historical and current, that afflict our society can often be dropped off on schools' doors. And I think it's really important that we have a conversation and we are sort of level-headed about what we ask of schools, what we ask of teachers, because I think some of the frustration that we're seeing from teachers is that they're being asked, or even previously talking about bus drivers or other folks that are affiliated with the schooling system, they're being asked to solve problems that A, they didn't necessarily create, or B, they may not have the tools or time to be able to deal with. And so these questions that we keep getting brought up around parenting and what's happening outside the school. As I said before, most school years are only 180 days. Students may be going as little as 6-7 hours a day. That means that students are spending much more time outside of school than inside of school. And I think it's important. We shouldn't use that to excuse, as we said, schools receive a substantial amount of taxpayer money, and we have every responsibility to expect them to be able to use that money well in the task of educating students. But schools are not miracle factories, and we need to understand, especially when we talk about teachers. I mean, there's a sort of interesting, another way of thinking about this is think about folks going to the doctor, right? If you go to the doctor with a health problem, and they tell you,
and they lie to
you, your diet's not great, you need to fix your diet or you're going to continue feeling ill. And then you go home.
And you can't
don't
afford to
do
fix
that.
your diet.
You know, you don't follow that advice. You
Oh,
sleep
yeah,
poorly.
right.
Very few people go and say, well, that's a bad doctor. Like, oh, I can't believe, well, look how terrible that doctor is. It's like,
Let's
no, I mean,
just
the
talk
doctor
about
said to
medical
the person what they were
malpractice,
supposed to
shall
do.
we?
But health and, you know, education works the same way. It's sort of a handshake between the student and the teacher, between the family and the school. And I think it's important that we hold as best as possible both of those sides of the handshake accountable. We absolutely need to look at schools and look at teachers and expect teachers to be well-trained professionals, to keep up with the latest pedagogical developments, to have strong amounts of content knowledge of what they're doing in their schools. We need schools to be well-run, to be well-organized, to communicate with families well, all of the things that we expect from schools. But it is also appropriate to say, hey, we need to hold students accountable. The students have to try. They have to come in and they have to participate in class. They have to do their homework. They have to study. And if they're not going to do that, you can have fantastic teachers and wonderful schools, and that's not going to happen. And parents need to do the same thing. Parents need to be supporting their students, working with the school. They're not always necessarily going to get along or see eye to eye on everything, but they need to be kind of in that handshake of that shared enterprise between those two institutions. And any time where we see that breakdown, if it's because the parents aren't holding up their end of the bargain, or the students aren't holding up their end of the bargain, or the teachers aren't holding up their end of the bargain, or the school isn't holding up their end of the bargain, we're going to see problems.
Somebody's not holding their
sort of
end of the bargain.
Any sort of conversation
because we are
one of those
paid as
groups
Americans.
and points at them and says, you need to get your
right.
house in
Talking
order,
way too
is
much.
going to, by definition,
Michael
sort of
McShane.
miss out all of those other important areas. We need to be looking at all of those different institutions, all of those different individuals.
It
and
says
having high
Americans
expectations for all of
celebrating.
them.
I think I've talked with my mom about her experience a lot. She's now an art teacher in an elementary school, and she sometimes expresses frustration over you only can control and have an impact on the students when they are physically in your classroom, and then there's a lot of times that they are not in that classroom or they're not in the school, and that's having a broader impact. I want to bring in Mia calling in from Maryland on the educator line so we could all hear from another teacher. Good morning, Mia. You're on with us.
Good morning. This is like probably several days conversation with all the things that are wrong with our education system. So I'm a former educator. I left in 2015 in my area due to corruption. And there's just a myriad of things that's wrong with our system, right? But one of the things is that just like a lot of the other institutions in America at this time, we don't really have people with common sense.
She's a black woman. People lack common sense.
Kind of putting a blueprint in of how they're going to work successfully, right? So if you talk to any teachers across the spectrum, across the country, they're going to tell you one of the number one things that they have issues with is the curriculum, testing, how I don't know. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. I'm freezing up because I'm nervous. But
you're doing great.
Most teachers complain about curriculum. Most of them complain about testing. And, of course, most of them complain about just the general culture in America, how education is not held on a pedestal anymore. Teachers are not held on a pedestal anymore. And that's why we're falling behind every other first world country, as well as countries that we don't consider supposedly first world countries, right? Everybody out-maths and out-sciences our kids. We've dropped below the 20 category for math and science by itself. Our literacy rate is garbage. And what's crazy about it is we keep trying all these new things to try to be innovative and new. That's one thing that America does. And not even realizing that a lot of the old things that we used to do actually work better. Amen. And one of those things, had many discussions about this, is like just teaching through root memory. Teachers don't have a long enough time to stay on subject matter. That's one of the really big issues that you don't hear people talk about outside of teacher forums. They don't have long enough to stay on certain subjects for children to retain it. That was a very big issue. And I saw a difference just from the 20-year difference of me being in elementary school to the kids that I then put in elementary school in 2007. Our teachers stayed on multiplication long enough. They stayed on parts of speech speech long enough. They stayed on the scientific subject long enough. And you know how they managed that time? They kept giving us homework and worksheets when we were done. The new
You came from a black school. Homework and worksheets.
They would give us worksheets to reinforce the stuff we had learned.
Worksheets when you can't comprehend what you're reading.
And people are so against homework now because everybody's home life is such garbage now. But homework is one of the reasons why kids used to do better on tests.
Perhaps
used to do better in any type of, form where they're actually being tested on their knowledge. But now you have parents fighting against homework. Last thing, and I'll wrap it up, is about culture. There's a lot of dog whistles about culture in this country, in this current climate that we're in. It's been going on since the 80s, but especially when it comes to black, white, and other blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you something. Defunding our black communities, defunding our schools, keeping our politicians in a corrupt system is one of the reasons why a lot of our schools are failing. All of this stuff is systemic. So when I hear even black teachers call in that are working at private schools talking about, well, it's the parents this and it's the parents that. Listen, we never have conversations in the United States about the root cause of a lot of these problems. And the root cause of a lot of these problems is America has really, really become piss poor morally with the way we raise our kids, what they watch on television, video games they play, all that stuff. And also, we never connect poverty to a lot of these issues. A lot of times, parents are not bad people. They're just struggling, and they don't have the time to be with their kids and to do what their kids need the way parents that are wealthy or well-to-do have. And they don't have the resources because their communities are defunded. And it's not everybody. We're seeing a change. But, just to put that out there. Sorry, I know that's a lot.
Mia, thank you. Michael, we have about 10 minutes left, and there are a few other callers, so I want to make sure we get to them. So was there one thing that Mia said that you'd like to either respond to or point to your data about?
No, I think that a lot of what she was saying is echoed in our data, right? Sort of brought the statistics that you brought up earlier, where you have a lot of teachers that are frustrated that they see people, I think she phrased it as, people without common sense, their subjective judgments up to where these folks, but people that have perhaps a more abstract view of what's going on in schools have lots of big plans. The one thing I put out that I think really resonated with me was there was a really formative book that I read during my sort of training as a researcher, sort of after I finished teaching, but before I became a researcher. And it's written out probably 25 years ago. It was a book called Spinning Wheels by a researcher named Rick Hess, who was a teacher himself and then went on to study schools. And the thing that was fascinating when he was writing this in the late 1990s and early 2000s was there was this belief about schools that poor performing schools or schools across the country that aren't doing well, they're not trying anything. They're not doing anything. They're just failing year after year and no one's doing anything. Well, he studied, I think it was like the 57 largest school districts in America. And what he actually found was not that they weren't doing anything. It's that like every 18 months they were embarking on a new major proposal.
Something new.
So what he coined this term is this idea of like policy churn, which is that new superintendents come in or new administrators come in and they want to do their new thing. They will have their new literacy curriculum or their new one-to-one devices or whatever it is. And they start it up and it maybe works or it maybe doesn't, and then either a new person comes in or they find out it doesn't work and they decide they want to do the new thing, and teachers are left constantly in this sort of spinning vortex of, wait, are we still doing the last thing, or do we need to do this new thing? Should we do them both at the same time? Should I stop that old one? And so I think this idea, I think lots of teachers' frustration is coming out of the same thing. There have been all sorts of, there's been so much writing recently in like the national press about educational technology.
Lack of leadership.
There's really been a kind of backlash to it, and that shows up a little bit in our data, particularly around things like AI, cell phones, and others. But what we're asking teachers constantly, and again, people who aren't actually in the classroom every day, all right, now everybody's got an iPad, or hey, now we're using a new math curriculum, and there's just lots of frustration stemming from that.
What are we doing?
One slide that stood out to me in this broader context of teachers tracking the progress in their classroom is it says less than 1/3 of teachers overall feel positively about their students' progress this year. District school teachers are less likely than private school teachers to believe their students are progressing very well. And then on the right-hand side, this blue box, it says among all teachers since March 2025, in terms of academic learning, -7 points, emotional development, break even, and social development, -1 point. Let's hear now from Greg calling in from Glen Allen, Virginia on the All Others line. Good morning, Greg. You're on with our guest.
Yeah, so
I talk to a lot of teachers, and one thing that, just from looking at it, it seems like we are operating according to a K through 12 model that's been the same model for the last 150, 200 years.
Yeah.
And until we bring in some education reform, and I'm not talking about new initiatives, I'm talking about a whole flip. The whole K through 12 model needs to completely change because it's just not working, and we keep going down this same road. And so we need to look at some international models. We just need complete education reform. Because if we continue with this K through 12 model that we've been implementing for the last 200 years, we're going to continue to have these same problems. One suggestion would be to have the kids go to school 3 or 4 hours a day in the classroom and then spend the rest of the time learning something on a farm or a technical skill. But we can't do that because of the culture. The culture won't allow us that education reform. And I'm afraid we're going to continue to have these same problems as long as we keep using the
entitlements
model of moving kids just around, and that's it.
Yeah.
Could you comment on that? Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. I think bringing in a historical perspective is really important. The schools look the way that they do, oftentimes because of the problems they needed to solve when those schools were created. So if you think about the comprehensive high school that many of us would be familiar with, a large high school, maybe you have a school district that has many elementary schools, a smaller number of middle schools, and a very few number of high schools. That emerged roughly at the turn of the 20th century to solve really specific problems. That when you had students spread out in a bunch of smaller schools, it was tough to get a critical mass of students together to have higher level coursework, to be able to hire a chemistry teacher or a physics teacher, to have a library or a band or a shop class. And we said, hey, what if we do this one big building and we put everybody in one place?
That's where they always
are there, the resources that they need, and then put all of the students in there. Now, that is a perfectly reasonable and I think actually quite brilliant solution to a problem that existed at that time period.
Schoolhouses.
The question is, well, are the problems still the same today? Do we still need to have one big building that everybody goes to because that's the only place where we could have like a library, for example, or a shop class? I think there's a good argument that could be made that many of those resources are actually spread throughout the community. I think this was sort of hinted at in some of the callers' points. If you're trying to learn a trade, you may not necessarily need to have a shop class in school. You could work at a local union apprenticeship shop or at a technical college or working on site with folks that are building houses or buildings or any of those things. We need the kind of policy flexibility, the funding flexibility. And some states are starting to invest in programs like this that allow people to kind of break it up and say, hey, listen, maybe some of this is going to the school, but some of this is going to the apprenticeship, and we can break down those things and make it work. But I think the right way to think about it is, what are today's problems? What are the problems that schools are trying to solve today? Because if we have institutions that were made to solve yesterday's problems, they're probably still good solving yesterday's problems, but they may not be the same problems that we have today. So I think that's a first step. It's like, what are the problems that we need to solve today? How do we prepare our students for the workforce of the future, but also for like the society of the future, the democracy of the future, all of these things that are very much in flux right now. How are schools preparing students across all of those different dimensions in order to be successful adults in all facets of their life?
We're barely scraping the surface of all this data, and folks could go to edchoice.org to look it up. Before we take one last call, here's a couple more slides that stood out to me. Teachers are generally satisfied with their students' use of technology in school, with similar levels of satisfaction in private and public schools overall. And then district school teachers are more likely to think their students spend too much time using technology compared to private school teachers who believe their students use it less frequently. Let's squeeze one more call in. We have Mike calling in from Akron, Ohio on the educator line. Good morning, Mike. You're on with us, and apologies if I cut you off because we only have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, well, thank you. I taught at junior high school in the Akron Public Schools. I was lucky. The name of the school I taught at was Goodyear Junior High School, and the principal was Mr. Richard Averett. And every morning he got on the PA and said, "Good morning, students and staff at Goodyear. Good things happen at Goodyear, and these are some of the good things that will happen today. It'll be quiet in the hall between classes, because I will be in the hallway myself. We will have a nice lunch. We will have potatoes, beans, and corn. And after school will be tomorrow will be Friday. After school we'll have a dance, and be sure you dress appropriately for the dance. And let's have a good day today here at Goodyear Junior High School." As he set the tone, every single day. He got on the PA within a minute after the tardy bell. You could count on him being on the PA within 1 minute after the tardy bell rang at 8 o'clock. It was consistent as could be. And man, he was African American. He had a really rich baritone voice. In fact, he was a music teacher when he was younger. You could tell by the way he got on the PA. The principal of the school is the number one factor to help you to have a good day. And they on that PA every morning. First, within a minute after the tardy bell rings, believe me, that helped a whole lot. Our school was 50% white, 50% black. It was a great school, well integrated. I missed it so much. I'm retired now, but principals do play a big part. Mr. Averett sure did.
Mike, thank you for that, and thanks for your service. Michael McShane, let's finish up with that in about one more minute. Just talk about what you've noticed in the data when it comes to leadership overall and the impact it could have on the school setting.
Yeah, it's super important, right? That all of those things that sort of was brought up, and it was brought up on callers earlier today. Students come into that classroom from their previous classroom, from the hallways, from the cafeteria, and all of those things that are outside of a teacher's individual control. So as far as schools can make those positive experiences for students where they come into the classroom ready to learn, excited, interested, trusting that things are going to go to plan and be organized and safe and all of those things that they need to be able to learn. Leadership plays a huge role in that, and so I think it's incredibly important the role that principals and other administrators play in schools.
We've been chatting with Dr. Michael McShane. He's the Director of National Outreach at EdChoice, and they have these really fascinating surveys and data about how teachers are feeling, how the K-12 system is navigating. Real quick, Michael, where on the website, how can people access it if they want to see some of those slide results that we've been going through?
Yeah, absolutely. If you head to edchoice.org and pull up the polling tab, you may have to click a couple different ways. And also just Googling EdChoice Morning Consult. We have a whole landing page for it, and you can pull up all of the, not just the polls, the exact questionnaires that we use, and then all of the cross tabs. If you're interested in different demographic groups, we split them out between, I think, 30 plus different demographic groups. If you're interested in, we've been talking about the averages today. We have actually all of those different gradations and different groups, geographic, political.
You can just go to the census.gov and see all of that data.
Yeah, like I said, we only scraped the surface. We didn't even get into the topic of AI and how it's impacting school, but you do have questions and comments and data on that. Dr. Michael McShane, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. We packed a lot into this show, talking about the president's trip to China, talking about the war, talking about education. Ceasefire is up next.
Oh, ceasefire, it never comes in. Goodbye, ceasefire. Morning watch list. Goldman, whatever. We can just, good morning, good morning, good morning. Yep. Let's see get all these little information shots here. The National Center reminder, the heart of God and the heart of God's knowledge is something else. Okay. Join us Sunday at 10 a.m. Yes, I hear you. Tea talk? No. Windy conditions for the whole weekend. It's going to be windy. It's not windy right now. I think it starts at 11 o'clock or something like that. Yes, let's see.
During our 100 Days of Summer, we're dropping new deals every single day. At Terrible's, the calendar is stacked. Free products, buy one, get one offers, and 50 cents off each gallon of gas every day. What are you waiting for? The only way to find out is to download the Terrible's Plus Rewards app and earn daily rewards all summer long. 100 Days of Summer at Terrible's. Something new
Sunday, as we look at the satellite radar, it's very, very quiet on the Saturday. As you can see here, not much going on. All the active weather, all the clouds really staying well to the north of us. It is going to be the wind on Sunday. Now, Saturday we'll see wind up to around 20, 25 mile per hour gusts. But Sunday, however, we'll see wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour at times. And the high wind warning that you see for southern regions of Nevada will go into effect at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and last right through into 5 o'clock on Monday morning. So weather headlines look like this. Very strong wind coming at us. We've got into next week. Temperatures all over the place into the 90s, 80s, and 70s. And by late next week, we'll see temperatures in the mid to upper 90s. Here's a look at the 7-day forecast. 93 for Saturday. Monday, 78. Back to 97 on Friday.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, I'm going to go to my theme song. Y'all ready for it? Got to go to notes. Notes. Enjoy the theme song. What is that? I don't know what that is.
My city on fire. My city on fire. I'm sorry I fight ya. I'm just trying to be better. Too cold for a sweater. Nah, there's no forever. We on search for better. We on search for better.
Wow. So Good, good morning, good morning. And today, let's see what today is. May the 16th. You know, the May revision is all about America across the nation. Ensuring what? Something, huh? Okay, let's see what this is. We gotta go in there to see it. I hope it. I told him that shit, and he's gonna warranty that shit. Cause I'm not gonna play this shit with him. Oh wow, my son is so whatever. And I don't have time to play the games with him because, the whole thing is that people put you in a position to where what? You can't function. And then what? This is a life. This is really consequences. Real consequences always. Get on my fucking nerves. It's real. Yeah, let's talk about this. In America, you can only do what you can do. Otherwise, you can't do anything. But when you have children that you entrust, then you can't do anything if they're trying to take a risk with you. This is America. 3 sons. One that is 42, one that is 40, and then I have a 29-year-old. A 29-year-old, I want to say he's very lazy. He has to be on him to do everything, but he gets the work done. I promise you, he gets the work done. He is a quality employee. My 40-year-old, well, hey, he is whatever. Yeah, I can't do this right now. This is my son. It's real. He became bent. I told him that. Yep. Okay, let's do this. Oh no, we have to do it this way. Mm-hmm. Yes, sirree. Life is what it is. And then what? Yes, I realize that has not been set up yet. He didn't answer his call. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just really stressed right now. But I'm more stressed about the situation that we're here in America because it is we the people. Hmm. And we don't necessarily talk about anything as a nation. And we're not ensuring that I was all out of the show, all out of it, but now I'm back in it. Oh Lord, it's real. And I gotta tell you, the real deal is that this is life. And liberty has consequences. And it just does. And so the reality is that, here we are, living in America. The reality is it's real. Hmm. Yep. 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 I'm going to go to another song because that's about what I can manage right now. I'm going to manage one. Notes. Hmm. And one more song, right? I think so. Guess it's just real for me. I think I'm going to go back to the show I was on yesterday. Hold on. Add the background music. Add it. And go back there.
For member who's receiving services, as well as a range of providers and community members and advocates. So we really thank you for your time and the investment that you're making in this work. Please know that we're using this input, we are documenting this and communicating. We meet at least 3 or 4 times a week on this project and are using this input in each of those. So I want to thank you again for your time and wanted to make sure that those who missed our first meeting had a chance to see this summary. And as a reminder, this meeting is subject to open meeting law, so we really appreciate all members of the public that are here as well. The goal is to make this forum as discussion-based as possible, so I invite any that are able to join us on camera and really welcome you to raise your hand. Notably, the discussion section will be with our working group representatives. There will be a chance for public comment after each agenda section, so we will have that as a dedicated slide, so we welcome members of the public to contribute at that time. So with that, we're going to move into our agenda today. I'm really excited to share a little bit of data we have here at Medicaid, both at a national level, a state level, and within our Medicaid data sources as well. Some of this may be familiar to those that have been here a lot longer than I have, but I found this to be a really helpful summary of really where we are at as a state and where we need to go with this transformation. So I'd like to start with some national data here. There is a nonprofit called Mental Health America that publishes an annual ranking of states based on outcomes and access to care. And you'll see here that Nevada is ranked 51st out of 50 states in the District of Columbia. And that has been the case for 7 years, the past 7 years in a row. So as we know, we have significant improvements to be made. You'll see a couple aspects of the ranking, components of where that goes. Slides will be posted publicly as well if you'd like to take a look at that full report. But a sobering place to ground ourselves as we go a bit deeper. So this shows kind of a range of where some of those outcomes are stemming from. So you'll see 1 in 6 children across our state have a diagnosed mental health condition, and that ranges. High school students are reporting prolonged sadness or hopelessness, as well as suicidal ideation, well above national averages, and 1 in 7 children in our state are diagnosed with a substance use disorder. This, importantly, is statewide Nevada data. We're going to talk about what that means from a Medicaid context. So just to level set here, Medicaid covers 1 in 2 children in our state. Clark County has the highest proportion here of 3 in 5 youth in Clark County are covered by Medicaid, 2 in 5 in Washoe, and 1 in 2 children in our rural counties. Notably, 78% of children covered by Medicaid identify as Black, Indigenous, or other categories of people of color. We'll use the term BIPOC throughout this presentation. Notably, 88% of Black children in our state are enrolled in Medicaid. So there are very significant health equity implications for this work that we're undertaking. So with that context on who we're serving with Nevada Medicaid, I think it's important to turn to what do the behavioral health outcomes look like within that population. So you'll see here it's quite similar to that slide I shared earlier on what that prevalence looks like across the state. So 1 in 6 children statewide and within Nevada Medicaid have a diagnosed behavioral health condition. 80% of those children live in Clark County, which is roughly proportional to our population. 74% of children with a behavioral health diagnosis identify as BIPOC, as part of the BIPOC population. So with that kind of contextual data, I'd like to dive into a few specific areas. And this is where I'm really excited to pause. I will not be talking at you this full hour. We're going to pause after each of these and have some discussion as it relates to 2 aspects of care in our behavioral health continuum. So one is on our residential and inpatient treatment side, and the other is on our outpatient and community treatment.
What's
So
an outpatient
with all these
look
terms,
like?
I know all of us are coming to this work with a lot of different experience. I think it's helpful just to start with some level setting and some definitions. So inpatient services here, when we use that term, what we mean is short-term intensive care in a hospital setting for children with acute needs. So this is clinically appropriate for acute mental health treatment that requires 24/7 monitoring. It is not intended to be a long-term management of chronic conditions outside of crisis periods. Our residential treatment centers, or residential treatment as a care opportunity, really provides longer-term care than that inpatient service. This is housed in a live-in facility where children receive therapy, education, and support. So this is really intended to be the highest level of acuity outside of a hospital setting for conditions that are manageable through that are not manageable through regular outpatient services or community support. So that's quick context. Excuse me? Maybe getting some echo there. I'll pause for questions in just 1 second. I just want to share a couple items about the Nevada data, and then I look forward to the group's feedback here. So a few details specific to those types of care in Nevada. On the inpatient front, you'll see here that children enrolled in Nevada Medicaid have a 51% higher risk of an inpatient stay associated with a behavioral health diagnosis compared to the national average. So that bar at the top is the United States average of how many inpatient visits associated with behavioral health conditions there are. In Nevada, you'll see that bar is much longer. There's about 584 visits per 100,000 children. On the residential and on the residential side, those stays also outpace national averages, but it's a little bit harder to get that direct apples-to-apples comparison. And so you'll see here a summary of some of our residential treatment facility data. You'll see that nearly 20% of children in Nevada, children enrolled in Nevada Medicaid, were placed in an RTC out of state, so
Mm-hmm,
not in the state of Nevada.
Out of state.
And
That's right.
nearly 1 in 3 of those children stayed in a residential treatment facility for over a year. The average length of stay is between 9 and 12 months. Notably, Medicaid spending really skews heavily on this high acuity settings. So 80% of Medicaid spending for behavioral health services is in residential or inpatient services, which equates to nearly $38 million of Medicaid funds.
So let me just dive a little deeper into this conversation, because he said that those children, and that's why Nevada was found guilty of violating Title II rights of children with disabilities, because they were shipping them out of state, away from their families for a long period of time. And I am saying, okay, hold on. This guy wants to talk, and I'm going to send this message to this young man, and so he can contact this guy. Should get on my nerves. Because he is really stressed. To spend that kind of money, I would be stressed too. What is that? I don't know what that is. Undue medical debt. That's not me. And that woman is dead. That's the cause. Okay, what is that? That's junk. And then they're all ready for voting. How exciting. Voting is happening. And I don't know anybody who's running in this election. But I do know Nevada's not making it. Oh, hell no. No, not at all. There's so much fraud. There's so much. Then, then you people, it's amazing. But, hey, it is what it is. They say that song, some people were made of plastic. And it was so real. The whole song. Some people, they're made of plastic. But some people, they're made of wood. Some people, hearts of stone. Some people, they're up to no good. And I'm just gonna see if my son is reaching out to that guy. And so 3 minutes ago, 17 minutes ago, 18 minutes ago, I told him he needs to reach out to him. I told him to clean it. I knew it wasn't clean. It wasn't clean. He had coffee in it. He's afraid to take it apart. Yep. So, He's gonna need to return it. And I ain't got nothing to say. He can just give him his money back. All that money for a minute. Yep. Why don't too? I don't want to be dealing with people and their purchases or what they desire to achieve in life. Because I know how to achieve what I'm going to achieve. That's just real. Oh, I'm going to go for one more song. Go to the notes category. Notes, 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 notes. There's something there. I don't think so. Over here. Here we go. Far away. The fucking box went, it's over there. Yeah, I just knew that one had to be parked with that styrofoam. The bottom parked, not parked with styrofoam. That they took those blunts. Bucket blunts. Is this one? My other one? It didn't sound like real out with the number check. Mm-hmm. What are my other ones? Mm-hmm. Brown. My yellow. Mm-hmm. 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 Hey, truly, 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 if you are living in America, then you just really don't understand what the fuck just happened. Because Donald Trump came in And he shut down the Department of Health and Human Services in regards to their lack of oversight for public schools or public services because it's just mandatory. Do you understand what I'm saying? Public education is mandatory. And that's what it is. And try not to send your child to school, and you will find out that they could take your children, and they do. They, when you realize that you've missed the boat, this is funny shit now. People had an opportunity to come and participate, engage in this whole process, and then they shut it down. So May the 18th, which is only around the corner, you won't have the opportunity to come up and share your opinion. But everybody got an opinion, just like everybody got an asshole, right? True that, true that. Storm Chaser sent me an attachment. And he must be watching the storm. Let me go see what I can see. Do you see what I see? I don't think so. You don't see what I see. But I'm going to see what you see. Okay. New information. A new update. It's Thursday. A level 3 of 5 red tornado has been issued for southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, eastern Iowa. Rise 26 will be out for this. More details coming soon. Okay. They are in chasing that storm. It's just real. Everybody gotta do something. But he reaching all the way over here to Nevada. We're gonna be sad. Those people are having a tough time over there. That's what we're gonna have. Be a sad person. I'm going back to my notes here. Here we go. Take care of yourself. 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 Mhm. Let's just understand it is about to change as you don't understand. And you are not in the first position, you are in the last position. Understanding. Perhaps you're not setting the parameters. And if you're not taking your shit to someone else's ability, then understand what I'm saying. It's you, the one, that's going to accept the liability. And that's just real. So what are we really saying here? I don't know. Thus, I just don't. It's real. Yep, it is real. So, am originally from Sacramento, California, but I was married for a while. And when I was in Sacramento, I was working, working for Los Rios Community College. And I did not realize that people would come together and lie when they know that something's going on that's wrong and you're just not a part of conversation. But when you realize that you were the topic of the conversation, then of course you too have a right to handle your business. And that's exactly what I'm looking forward to doing. Is looking forward to handling my business. And I can say, have a Sabbath because today is the Sabbath. And I'm sitting in the lap of luxury because I am definitely sitting at my house on my patio, which could look a little bit better, but very comforting to me. And, you know, when you understand that the blessings of life is you're still breathing the air, you have to let go of all the other because that's that you cannot control. And therefore, what can I say? Liberty and the pursuit of. Let's all understand. It's that thing we call the pursuit. And that's just real. Maya B invited me to her channel. I don't know. I don't think so. I can invite her to my podcast. Share it. Share it. And Instagram. Do, 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 do. What happened to the messenger? I don't even see it. You have to go here. Go there. Life and liberty. Liberty and life. And this is the year of 2026. So if you've never, ever thought about how public services affect you, then understand when we have the ability and have had the ability to vote, to share our concerns publicly, and then choose not to. I'm just trying to understand. Are we dealing with common sense factors here? I don't believe so. Why? Why? Because, you have to understand failure is not an option in America. have to understand so, you know, to another song. Yep. Someone help me. Uh-oh, what is happening? She's always, I can't get in her show. No, I'm in my own show. Yeah, because she was in I invited her to my show. She didn't come. You know, I got time for games. People who play games. No time at all. It is going to be what it is. As life, liberty, and the pursuit of continues every single day. You know what I'm saying? Seriously now. Mm. Fantasy is reality. And you get it from what? You don't get it from your children. That's real. Mm-hmm. I had to see that one because, you know, it's called respect. So life and liberty. And I'm not a fool. But, you know, you kind of get what you put out there. If you reap dysfunction, you kind of gather dysfunction. You do get back what you sow. And you reap what you sow. And you sow and so shall you sow. You shall reap, you know. And it's written like that. And it's just real. Yep, we must have gotten the message because the boys start frantically past, you know, whatever, because that's a lot of money. Shit. Paid for that insurance, it didn't matter. And they threw that box around like it was not fragile. That's just real. hmm Life, liberty, and whatever. All right, so today is Saturday, but I am getting ready to leave. And so I don't have a problem It's just real. I know who I am. And I will always be who I am. Don't expect change. We meet again, y'all. Y'all have a blessed day. Please follow me over there on my Spotify.